So I have recently responded with a brief comment to a YouTube page called Bob Perelman by Charles Bernstein, in which the poet Charles Bernstein asked the poet Bob Perelman what he thinks of Chelsea, without further defining that word. And then Bob Perelman responds with a few brief sentences regarding the relationship between the avant-garde and a word that is either aggression or digression or regression. At least my perception of the verbalization is unclear, and there's a kind of ambiguity. And Bob Perelman frames this aspect of the avant-garde, which is either aggression or digression or regression, as an interest of his that he remarks has increased as he's gotten older. And he provides an account of this, not really an account. He briefly touches upon this idea as a response to Charles Bernstein's question. So, Bob, what do you think about Chelsea? And then when he's finished, discussing his interest in either aggression or digression or regression's relationship to the avant-garde, he concludes with the sentence, "So that's how I would answer your question," which is clearly the answer to another question, but much less clearly the answer to the question, what do you think about Chelsea? So this made me think about the possibility of multiple interpretations of what Chelsea might mean, and then following along those lines, what thinking about Chelsea might mean. The obvious interpretation is that Charles Bernstein is asking Bob Perelman whether he cares for Chelsea, likes or dislikes Chelsea. What is your judgment? But I believe the word that he uses is thinks. So thinking has a lot more connotations than simply judgments of taste or personal attitude. And so I begin thinking about Chelsea, and how as a poet or an artist or an avant-gardist, I would approach thinking about Chelsea. And then for whatever reason, I thought of the musician and poet Robert Calvert's brief piece that occurs on the Hawkwind album, the 10 seconds of, and this poem structure is quite simple. It's a countdown of what Calvert thinks about in these 10 seconds of, and maybe I thought about that particular structure because because as I recall this conversation, this very brief conversation between Charles Bernstein and the poet Bob Perelman, and I may be recalling it incorrectly, but as I recall it, Charles Bernstein uses the verb think. What do you think about Chelsea? So I thought about things, I guess, the way that Robert Calvert thought about, had these memories, right? Or these images that lasted for these seconds of eternity. So I thought I maybe use this structure as this countdown structure as and to perform it improvisationally, at least first, before I do any research on what meanings the word Chelsea might have other than the ones I'm familiar with. I'll allow myself a certain amount of ambiguity and lack of clarity because this is a poetry and it's the avant-garde, and hopefully my readers can respond to that by making even more complex and more imaginative connection out of the performance than what my intentions might be for it. In the 10th second of Chelsea, I thought of all of those volumes of poetry I could list by name, which had been written by John Ashbery, and the number was too small to bother with the listing. In the 9th second of Chelsea, I thought of all of those Leonard Cohen lyrics I could recall by memory, and there were so many it would have been impossible to even begin an attempt at a listing. In the 8th second of Chelsea, I thought about all of those letters L and S, which did not, when transformed into numerical values, represent Fibonacci numbers. In the 7th second of Chelsea, I thought of the seals that lie on the beaches along the coasts of Baja California, and those seals referred to in that brief Robert Grenier poem, which probably doesn't have a title. In the 7th or perhaps 6th second of Chelsea, because now I have lost count, I thought of Che Guevara and wondered whether I should devote a page to him in the Book of Seals called 144. In the 5th or 6th second of Chelsea, I thought of seashells spelled with an extra C, and in turning the C, I thought of Navajo sand paintings with their openings at the top to allow spirits entry to and from the work of the art. In the 5th or 6th second of Chelsea, I thought of Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and all of the other singers of the 60s who were taken from us because perhaps we didn't bother to pay enough attention to their plights and their stories. In the 4th or 5th second of Chelsea, I thought of the names of the angels and how they end with a reference to a word which means Lord. In the 3rd or 4th second of Chelsea, I thought of the A Train and the Chicago 7. I thought of the above ground and the underground. I thought of the avant-garde. In the 2nd or 3rd second of Chelsea, I thought of all of those who might have this name. And whether those individuals might be poets or avant-gardists. In the 1st or 2nd second of Chelsea, I thought of the 7 letters. And the 7 angels responsible for the seals. In the 1st, or beyond the 1st, perhaps before the 1st second of Chelsea, I thought of all of the different ways that he or she or L can see conceal, lease,
or heel.